This is magical, right? I haven't individually written a single line of code manually. And we have a full platform up and running, like fully scalable. Everything what you would expect from a platform that you would join as a user is there. And we haven't written any single line of code manually. And some people think, okay, that's bullshit, especially engineers.
All right, welcome to Inside Scoop Podcast, where we explore companies and ideas shaping the future. I am Sean Emory, co-founder, chief investment officer at Avory Co, where we run high conviction equity strategies based on investing where the world is headed. You know, this episode, to be clear, is not investment or recommendations of any companies or securities mentioned. If you want to find out more about us, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our Investing with Data newsletter on LinkedIn or Avory.xyz. But to be clear, today's guest is someone who's not just thinking about AI's future, but actually building it. We're here with Yuma Heymans. He's the founder and CEO of Omega.ai, a company at the forefront of automation. Their goal, pretty unique, a fully autonomous business. Reading a lot of your work and hearing some of the stuff you're talking about, one where AI agents not only run, the company, but run software engineering, marketing, sales, operations with really minimal human input. We're going to dive into how that works, what's still missing, what that means, I think, for the future of business and investing. But Yuma, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, man, Sean. I really appreciate it and looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah, so we'll get into your background, but I think at first is, you've said by the end of 2025, Omega AI's business will be completely autonomous. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, definitely. It's good to also put the nuances there straight, because an autonomous business, most people think about some sci-fi kind of picture of, some business doing something mysterious and people not being involved anymore. That's definitely doesn't have to be the case. In most cases, for me, an autonomous enterprise, I would say, would be a company where day-to-day operations are completely autonomous. And also the day-to-day management of those operations are completely autonomous. So AI or AI agents more specifically are taking care of those operations. And there will still be people involved, but from different angles, like the highest abstractions of information. There will be people still involved with, for example, an interest in the company, stakeholders, outside stakeholders, regulators, very important customers. They still have to be served by this human element, and that would still be part of the autonomous enterprise as well. But the operations are all being done by AI agents from a day-to-day business. And that could be, for an example, invoice processing, order fulfillment, HR operations, SDR activities like sales development representatives, AI agents doing the work that people now do manually primarily. And this obviously has a lot of implications that we'll talk about today. But for me, my biggest passion is, bringing those companies closer to what I would call as an autonomous operation, and freeing in that journey people up to do more high-level abstraction tasks in the enterprise that I think people are also more generally a lot more excited about.
Cool. Now, so it sounds amazing if you can, automate, pretty much all these different tasks inside of an organization, give more autonomy to, the one that's created, this company that they're trying to create, and less managing of people and more tools and systems. Like, how did you get here? Your background of, getting to Omega AI and really thinking about this, autonomous business. And then I think you're selling tools beyond that, but, just talk about, your origin to get into this point.
Yeah, so I've seen the value of automation from a consulting perspective. So I used to work at KPMG, Bain & Company, and always this big topic was around automation, right, for businesses. That was actually always the underlying demand of customers demanding consulting services. It's not that they want to have like a slide deck as like a full result or like as the completed deliverable of their need. They just want to have something done smarter, faster, cheaper. And I've seen the potential of automation there in the enterprise. And especially now with this new wave of AI with LLMs where basically the nature of LLMs being prediction and generality in terms of whatever they can do in terms of information processing. That's, I think, the most interesting transformation that we've seen so far in technology going back like 3 decades. And that's also going to have the biggest impact on how companies operate. Obviously, there are a lot of huge challenges as well that I've seen in my time going through, building an AI recruiter, for an example. Also in my consulting time, where you always, once you implement AI agents, for an example, in the enterprise, you'll come across the actual challenges, which are usually primarily organizationally focused and have to do with the external environment of an organization. And we can deep dive on that, but I think that's also the current stage that we're in. We basically have the technology, we have the intelligence now with the large language models being commoditized. Now we're trying to put tool use on there, and that's a very pragmatic kind of approach of making these AIs actionable. So what I summarize it with is usually the application of AI, making actionable AI in the context of an organization. And that second part, that's actually going to be the longest challenge and the longest thread of activities that we'll have to figure out together. And that's going to be very interesting how that's going to play out in the coming decade.
Yeah, and before you talked about humans, and like I'm interested, like where do you think humans still play a role in this model that you're talking about? We'll always need some level of high level oversight, I think, or what's your thoughts on the role that humans will play?
Yeah, so I think 2 things. One is invention, and the second thing is direction. So a lot of information that LLMs or agents do their activities on is obviously somewhere like captured digitally. And to be able to do exactly what's in the interest of a company, you also need to go inside of the minds of the people who are involved with that company. For an example, a big stakeholder in a company doesn't necessarily have their thoughts written out or their thesis or their exact interest in that company written out exactly how they want it, right? So an AI agent is probably not fully aware of that. So that's a great example of where you would see a human still in the middle of that process representing the interests of the stakeholders, which can be regulators, investors, but also C-suite, and translating that to the actual operations of AI agents. So we're going to see this very interesting transformation of people becoming AI managers, so managers of AI agents, with those managers having sort of their digital minions, let's say, or from another perspective, respected colleagues, as if they were actually like your physical, real life colleagues that you are working with. And again, for many people, this sounds as some sci-fi kind of vision, from some random tech founder, probably, who spent too much time in Silicon Valley. But I'm seeing this becoming reality at very small scale now already. And we also see it in our own company where we automate loads and loads of activities. We can talk about that more, about software engineering, marketing, and sales. But the most interesting thing is I already see myself become a manager of these AI agents. So I literally check in like on a day-to-day basis with my AI agent team, and I check in on what they have actually produced. I review their work if it's still in line with what we're doing. And what humans can do, what AI so far hasn't been able to do, is have an actual ambition, a vision, and execute on that and iterate on that. Humans have this neophilic kind of nature and behavior where they're always looking for something new to do that they can build upon. And that's definitely something that we haven't seen, also not emerging in AI systems, also not if you put like an AI agent framework around it or whatever. That's definitely not something that we've seen signals of. So that will be definitely, what on the long term direction, giving direction to AI agents, that will be definitely a human responsibility still. And on the longer term, and also from now on up to 10 years from now, invention is probably something very particular to the human nature. And I haven't seen any AI being able to automate that.
Got it. And obviously, you're building this business, but what it's more personal, but like, what's the hardest personal challenge, to get to this point, to, in this part of your journey? Anything you can share, to the listeners?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is that there's a lot of noise in the market currently around AI. So you have to spend a lot of time, or at least I spend a lot of time on trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And then also keeping close to my vision of this autonomous enterprise and not getting distracted by anything else in the market. If I believe like the influences online, if I take that information at face value, it's almost impossible to build a company right now, right? Because there's so much information, there's so much possible, and there's something new like almost every day, which is insane. This has never been done before. This kind of rate of acceleration and innovation in the space with new software or language models, foundational models popping up. It's pretty crazy to even keep up with everything what's new. So I think, if there's one big challenge of currently being this AI entrepreneur or tech entrepreneur is keeping up to date with everything that's happening and filtering what's real and what's relevant for your own business.
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm sitting over here trying to build all these different systems with, some of the code generators that are out there that make it much faster for, someone that, understands code enough, but not, enough to, speed through it, specifically as I already have a day-to-day operation, right? So you're kind of doing this on the side, but it's going much faster. And, it's a renewed sense of innovation that's happening out there where you can start to recreate things that you've already created in the past and, perfect them using AI as, a co-pilot to help think through it, but also as a tool to deploy. For you though, in the business, breaking down, some of the automation that you're talking about, let's go department by department, where AI is really delivering today and where does it struggle? I think reading some of the stuff you've done, software engineering, I think is 70% automated, marketing, 90%, sales, 50 plus, percent automated, I think were some of the numbers. Just talk about, let's start in software engineering. I think you mentioned that Omega doesn't manually write code anymore. Your AI engineering agent does it. That's kind of what I was just referring to for ourselves. What does that process look like?
This is magical, right? I haven't individually written a single line of code manually. And we have a full platform up and running, like fully scalable, everything what you would expect from a platform that you would join as a user is there. And we haven't written any single line of code manually. And some people think, okay, that's bullshit, especially engineers hearing what our approach is. But it's all possible now just from a natural language perspective and a chat perspective with this AI agent. We use Cursor AI to actually build our platform. And it's literally how I start my day. If my day is about coding, then I just get behind my laptop and I literally talk to my AI agent in exactly the terms of what we want to develop and what the vision is. And obviously I write down a lot. So I make huge documents in terms of what has to be created, but that will be usually more the work of a product manager, right? And I'll give it to my AI software engineering agent, and he just writes it out and builds the entire code, structures the folders and the files so it makes sense, thinks about the technical implications and the dependencies in the entire context that it understands. It's really, for me, a magical experience. And yeah, a lot of kudos to the Cursor AI team who has built this amazing product. It's also one of the fastest growing companies in the world currently. So it's very interesting to see this as a use case from a Cursor AI company perspective. A great example for how we build our software as well, but also from a personal experience. It's my best example that I can give people currently of how AI agents are really becoming a reality, because it's really a digital colleague for me, right? It's not just a tool. I don't see it as a tool. It doesn't feel like a tool. I just talk to it in natural language. I communicate with it, and I get eventually what I want. I think that's the most interesting thing from an investor, founder, whatever perspective. Also just as a colleague, this is really something that you should get your hands on. Start working with these AI agents. But yeah, software engineering is now, I would say 70% automated, because that 30% that's left is basically writing out the requirements and those kind of things. If you even want to include that in the software engineering activity. But if you even leave that out, you could argue that software engineering per se is already 100% automated for our business.
Yeah, I was just on Replit, which is obviously another, code generator as well. And again, referring to some of the platforms we're trying to build is using that. And I would say, yeah, 70% of the way there. I mean, some of the more tedious stuff, and I'll punt it back to you in terms of, what do we need to do to get to 100% automated on that side? Or will we ever even get there? I see on my end, when you're starting to plug in APIs and, trying to plug in other platforms from the outside, you have to start getting a little bit more technical. But in general, 90-95% sounds, pretty attainable at some point over time.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's your thoughts on, what's preventing 100% automated, software engineering today?
So this is what I'm very excited about. This is also something that we really focus on from an Omega perspective with our company. To get to that autonomous enterprise, you need to make the threshold extremely low for people to automate things, right? It needs to be the only interface needs to be the natural language interface. Don't even need to look up your own API key, right? So an AI agent could do that for you. So what I mean by this is, if you onboard or if you try to set up a new automation for yourself, what most people do now is go to Zapier, for an example, or Make, whatever, and they set up a workflow, right? But they need to set up accounts for the individual tools they want to use. They need to find their API key. Sometimes they even need an app developer account, whatever. Then it really gets, for semi-technical people or non-technical people at all, that's already way too much to ask. So this is also something that we completely automate, and I see is very, very important. Is for an example, if you create an agent on Omega, it learns automatically how to use that tool, how to get access to that tool. And then it asks you for permission, obviously, but that's a click of a button. That's still a very important authorization, let's say, stage. Obviously give, the right permission, authorization to the agent to do certain things, and certain things they don't. But this is a very interesting, piece of the process where a lot of people actually churn and say, okay, this is way too technical for me to set up this whole workflow. And that's the great thing about agents just in general, is you can talk to them like if it's a digital colleague and let them set up, the things that you would set up otherwise technically yourself. And this will open up, you've just mentioned Replit, and Replit is even, you have Cursor AI and Replit is basically the app, the AI agent developer that's most easy to use, because you literally just talk to it and it even deploys your application for you, which is also a very technical process, right? So if I give Cursor AI to friends, they stop at some point because they have to also learn how to deploy apps and those kind of things. If I say, okay, try Replit, then the deployment is also included, and they actually manage to deploy at least a website or an app or something, and that's where you see they take away friction and open up a huge market of non-technical people who do want to automate stuff. And we're basically building that version, but then for the business users, right? To automate your business processes, your business workflows. I think it will get to that 100% for the more operational activities, but also for let's say the mid-level abstraction activities in the workforce. And it will be very interesting to scale that up to larger enterprises, since obviously for SMBs, it's a lot harder or easier than for large complex organizations to build something, deploy it, and see what it does. So for large enterprises, it's a completely different story.
Yeah, so software marketing are the other two, marketing and sales are the other two, areas, and even operational stuff. Like, is Omega? Obviously you're automating your business, but you're selling. Once you automate something internally for yourself, in theory, that becomes a product that people would kind of want. It would have to be tailored to their use case. Is kind of that what you're building at Omega, or just high level? Just talk about what you're doing to automate your business and how that translates into product initiatives for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So through Omega, the customers can access Omega, just to be clear there. So it's definitely a product that we market to customers. I'm most excited about putting Omega to the test with my own automations. So I've automated now my entire content marketing funnel. So Omega's website is completely AI generated, including all its articles, but also all its other content on the website. We are automating social media engagement, so commenting with AI agents. Those are basically AI agents who are doing our social media posting and engagement. And it's funny because I see my AI agents accounts grow faster than my personal accounts, which I manage manually, So here you also see the opportunity, but also the friction with humans and AI agents, because AI agents will be better at some of the tasks and will be, it will be hard to admit it in some cases, because it gets pretty personal because they take over part of your job. But I think if you get over that, it's only like the biggest enabler that you can imagine, because you'll have this free digital colleague who can do everything for you basically, and help you accelerate, help you do 10 times more than you would without them, or do exactly the same but do it with 10 times less time. Right, with 10 times less resources. It's your choice. So people can accelerate or just be way more efficient in the stuff that they do. And this is also very much underlying of everything that I automate from a workflow perspective, but also it's the mission of Omega itself. So that's what it's all about. I think it's more, it's making automation more accessible through this more natural, general interface, which is capable in tool use and the use of intelligence in their processes.
Yeah, you know what? When we think of automation, or like just trying to automate, using AI, or whether it's just logic-based, traditional RPA, I think one of the biggest challenges tends to be is like process mapping. And it's very similar to how, why there's a very few people that do software engineering, which is all logic-based and, mapping out, a process. You spin that to the everyday individual that has a small business that isn't necessarily thinking in these kind of like, engineering logic-based. The finance world, I think, thinks this way. Engineering and tech, I think, tend to think this way. But then there's other, markets that I think don't, right? So I think part of like, how do we, everyone, accelerate the use of AI by helping them define their processes internally to then map them out to then automate them. You can't automate anything you don't know. Obviously, there's tools out there that are trying to understand what your operational things are. Trying to maybe follow your workflows day to day by analyzing your keystrokes and such. But like in general, thinking about that for someone in your shoes, building a business to help others operate. How do you think about providing them tools so that they can understand the processes that they can automate? Because that's the friction point in my opinion. Everything else is like fairly easy once like using Make, Zapier, or even some of these new platforms that exist. I think it's fairly easy once but after but to get there, I think is a challenge, at least today.
It's such a good point. Like an RPA is the best example, right? Like only enterprises can implement RPA because you need like literally an army of RPA developers and consultants that you have to pay a lot of money. Obviously, we also have the teams at KPMG, Bain & Company, etc., that implement these automations and do the process mapping that you're talking about. Like it's a very complicated process, but also this ideally should be just a conversation, right, with an AI agent. And you'll just let this AI agent, this AI worker, you let them know, okay, this is what I do when I wake up and start my day, you know, and I would love to have it automated. So help me figure out how we can set this up. So what we're currently building in Omega is also in line of this is the ability to learn API documentation. We already have that. So it already understands what it can actually do with API documentation. So the technical documentation telling the agent, okay, this is how our software tool, like for example, Salesforce works. We're already there. And the next level, what we're currently building is going to be very interesting. Those workflows, so those processes that you're talking about that now have to be mapped. It will generate those automatically based on the conversation that you'll have with the agent, but also based on background data like your LinkedIn profile, so your professional background, or your company data. So it maps out what your company is just based on, you know, like doing the online research. So these kind of things really help in creating the right context for the agent and helping it understand how your business operates, and then can proactively suggest, okay, I would automate this process with this kind of a workflow. And ideally, humans wouldn't even look at a workflow, right? Only if there's something going wrong, it would be like an audit trail. A workflow would be an audit trail and not some semi-technical documentation that the user needs to set it up in the first place.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to get at, build products at the forefront to then, assist in that effort. Investment, market implications, as an investment firm, we're always thinking about, where the world is headed. AI-driven automation is really this huge shift here recently. Let's talk about the broader impacts there. What do you think this means for, startups? Should every, early stage startup, companies start rethinking their hiring process? And then even like legacy businesses, how should they be thinking about this as well, from your point of view?
I think every single company is going to have to review their hiring process and the workforce they have currently. I'm not going to say that every workforce is going to shrink, but many of them will shrink significantly. It's up to the company to decide if they want to do 10 times more or if they want to do the same, but with 10 times less resources. In that second case, it's definitely going to mean that they're going to have to, let people go because they want to do things more efficiently. If they want to do 10 times more of what they do today, then it doesn't have to mean that they're going to have to like shrink the workforce, let people go. As a matter of fact, they'll probably hire more people, but they'll also deploy like an army of AI agents, or at least to begin with some teams of AI agents that do a big chunk of the operational work. Imagine that 95% of the operations, or 90% of the operations in an enterprise are very low level, repetitive, recurring activities, right? So imagine that being taken over by AI agents. And then the 10% hyper focus on that with an extremely talented, but also probably large workforce that focuses on that 10% to make the differentiation. And that's going to be a very interesting way of making a difference in a very competitive landscape, is by being able, because you cover like the base with AI agents, you have this like talent base that can fully focus without getting distracted about the operations on the more differentiating, innovating factors, and really understanding the market, really deeply understanding their customers, their psychology, and how they think, how they operate, and then translating that obviously eventually to the AI agent teams. So there's definitely going to be a lot of shifting of talent between companies, and that will mean that a lot of talents will have to find, a different purpose, probably in life overall. But that sounds a little bit extreme, but it will be that level of transformation, I'm sure. And for the companies, it will mean that they have to completely review how they hire, if they still want to hire loads and loads of people, or they're going to focus on deploying AI agents for a part. And maybe means that they'll have to boost hiring because they need new talents coming into the company that can actually work with these AI agents, which is, a skill in itself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, prompt engineering, prompt writing, understanding, the different models that exist out there. If you need a co-pilot, you probably want, in a very similar way, you're going to interview, the versions of co-pilots that are out there to make sure that this, product is delivering exactly what you want as, a project manager to these systems. So that makes a lot of sense. Spinning back to investments, if you're looking at the AI landscape, investment opportunities there, where do you see kind of like the areas that, an investment firm or even a founder should stay away from, versus the ones, maybe they should be leaning into? We know there's the commodity aspects of, the foundation models now, and the models that exist out there. But then, then there's like skinning, just like ChatGPT, and just reforming at it in some sort of way. But then there's like real value. So like, split those two things from your lens, someone that is building business here, understands the space broadly, where would you stay away from and where would you go after?
I can't tell what other people should do because, like, for example, DeepSeek, we have all seen, what kind of amazing thing you can do by taking a foundational model as an example and doing things way more efficiently. So I think it's hats off for DeepSeek. So I wouldn't do it myself. It wouldn't be my focus, doing something like 10, 20x more efficiently. And that's basically the most important differentiator. What I would personally invest most of my time in is actionable AI, right? This is the next big wave, is going to be making AI actionable instead of just a chatbot where you just one shot at a question and you get something back, maybe with some reasoning involved. I don't think that's the biggest chunk of value captured in the AI space. What's going to be most valuable is when we get AI to this actionable level. And that's where all the money will go, because that's where you also see the economics of AI coming in, right? Very concretely, it will mean if you can automate something. So in other words, if you can make AI actionable in a given domain or a process or for a certain role, then you can also one-on-one start mapping the economics of it. The business case is really, really clear. If you have a team of 100 people doing something manually now, which you can either free up or let go of in the organization, but hopefully free up and repurpose their talent in the organization so they also have more exciting careers. And you can put AI agents on that are doing the same thing at 1/10 of the cost, doing it more effectively, faster, and also more transparently because they communicate everything and always leave an audit trail. Then it's a very, very easy business case to make for any C-suite executive or economic buyer who would make that choice, right? So we already see that the moment that AI becomes actionable, the business case and economics are just very, very easy to understand. And you don't necessarily see that with the chatbots currently in the enterprises.
From an investment lens, I'm trying to think whether, a highly efficient, low labor, like a human labor organization, would that get more value or less value, in the future from an investment firm looking at them? Meaning, if 90% of an organization was automated through computers, where's the value inherently in the underlying business? In some ways, depending on the industry, sometimes talent is hard to compete against, even if you have boatloads of money. We've seen that with OpenAI versus, the incumbents, let's say, where OpenAI was essentially first and best and still remains, pretty much, in the lead to some degree. I mean, we can, either way, they were able to carve out a place, underneath, some of the mega cap companies that have all the resources, talent in the world. So again, just like, what's your thoughts on that? Like a highly efficient computerized business, is it more valuable or less valuable from the eyes of an investor? I know what it is for the owner of the business. Clearly, if it's sustainable, then, the owner is, taking, in theory, depending on cost of compute and all these other resources, right? But passing that back to you for your view.
Yeah, definitely. No, this is a super interesting question, but because it's basically your question is about value perception, right? So how is a company perceived? And right now we overvalue like even an employee count. So not even looking
Sure.
at the quality of employees. Like this happens in Silicon Valley also all the time. If we, like with my first bootstrap business, we had like 10 employees, right? And it was a very interesting story to tell because we were able to bootstrap up till 10 employees. But what does it really mean to have 10 employees? Because what are they doing? How much are you paying them? You know, and you have all these kind of nuances that are very important to also include in that value perception, let's say, analysis. I think the zeitgeist of today is different because there will be companies with 2, 3, 4 people who do probably $1 billion of value, right? And maybe this takes some years to develop still, but there will be companies like this. It will be, you know, being introduced in, let's say, the broader spectrum of things. And that will obviously change people's perception about, you know, the amount of employees that you have to run a company. On the other hand, like talent will also be still be a differentiator because you'll have the best talent in the world, but not necessarily because you have the amount of headcount, you know, to show off, let's say, to other people. So always, yeah, the thing now has been headcount has been good for a certain reputation, especially if you're an early stage company and you can show 10 employees, it's better than one. That still is true, but it's also at the same time slowly changing. I think people will be more impressed by 1, 2, 3 person companies who do a lot in the market, have a high domain reputation, big revenue, and those kind of things. So it's changing. I already slowly changing.
Yeah. Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
No? All right. If you did, like, you know, if you or your, you know, cousin or friend or something like that had kids, like, you know, I have kids and, you know, I'm constantly thinking about, you know, what skill sets, you know, they should learn, right? You know, I'm doing this little Sunday thing for a little 6-year-old to learn code. And I still think that it's still going to be important to be able to, you know, whether you're not writing it on Replit or, you know, some of the other ones that are out there, it's understanding, you know, some of the logic behind it will likely allow you to get there faster. Mind you, we're talking 15, 20 years from now when maybe this thing even matters to, you know, these kids. But, you know, skill sets, like what are you thinking about, you know, skill sets that, you know, someone today that is young, what should they be thinking about learning as, you know, the world continues to shift more towards compute as an output or an input to an output? Yeah.
Definitely. I think about this a lot. I think like if you want your kids, any kids, to grow up in a world where they have abundance of opportunity, you know, invention is something that is very, very hard to compete with. So with invention, I mean like the broader spectrum of skills that you need to actually get something done on the longer term, right? So something relatively new. Like for an example, pyramids, we didn't build the pyramids just out of, you know, thin air. There was a huge hundreds of years project, and it required a lot of ideation and like ballsy moves and creativity and curiosity of how things work, right? So I think like the curiosity factor is going to be a very big one because we're able with our still very way more complex human brains that can process a lot more inputs at the same time and see nuances also in those inputs, for example, colors and those kind of things, and have a feeling with what a color would mean, for example, in our human context. I think those things combined translated to something that relates to creativity, invention, that would still be very, very relevant. So I think any ambitious kid who is like trying to figure out what they want, it would be very interesting for them, I think, to explore, discover new things instead of necessarily being an expert or a specialist in one given domain, because that's very, very hard to compete where AIs typically shine.
Cool. You look, before we wrap, I definitely wanted to hit you with a couple questions, some rapid fire. Just give me your gut reaction. You know, what's one AI trend you think people aren't paying enough attention to today?
So I think it's AI agents, because in our world, from your perspective as an investor, from my perspective as, you know, a founder who spends a lot of time in Silicon Valley, We see a lot of AI agent stuff happening, but there's also a lot of fluff. Like a lot of people just talking about, like, for example, workflow that they automated with Zapier and then just call it an AI agent. That's just a lot of BS, and we can't really work with that, So, but the biggest part of the people who are actually getting the most value out of AI agents are not talking about it enough yet and not exploring it enough yet. And those are typically business users who are like keen to explore automation of their own activities so they can free up their time and do something more interesting and probably move up the human stack where they do the more high level abstract reasoning and creativity related activities in the organization, instead of being stuck in like being some kind of a slave of being distracted by the operations of something that they probably don't even care that much about doing. So yeah, I think that's going to be the most interesting wave of this whole AI transformation revolution at a whole, is going to be how actionable AI or AI agents are going to find their way through to the actual end users, the business users, in my opinion, where most value is created. Not necessarily for the developers and the technical people, but the people who actually are in the middle of that process that has to be automated.
Got it. And then, along those lines, biggest misconception around, AI automation, like what do you think the biggest misconception is?
I think the biggest misconception currently for AI agents specifically is that workflows and tools are AI agents. So this can't be more
like Zapier as an example.
Farther away, like from the truth. Exactly, like Zapier. That's like Zapier standard workflow. That is not an AI agent in itself. AI agents use different methods like tools, but also like workflows to achieve their goals. But the AI agent as a whole is a autonomous digital entity that can plan, act, reflect, and collaborate, and which has the more general capabilities of reasoning and communication, which workflows don't have those capabilities. Workflows can't reason in itself, can't communicate in itself. AI agents can use workflows to get things done. And that's definitely something that business users primarily will have to learn to see the difference in, because if you misclassify a workflow for an agent, you forget to be attentive to what an AI agent actually is and why it is that they're so different and what their capabilities are and how you're gonna be able to work with them in a different way than you would man or use a tool or a workflow yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. A workflow is more finite while an agent is more, consistent, right? I mean, it's consistently functioning, as opposed to like a workflow kind of has a start and an end. And that's kind of generally it. One bold, two more questions, but one bold AI prediction for 2025, what would you say?
I think for 2025, we're already in 2025. So I think like generally what's true is that people overestimate what's possible in a year and underestimate what's possible in a decade, right? And I really see this like happening in front of my eyes with people overestimating what AI can do today and underestimating what it will do in 10 years from now, because then it's all sci-fi, but I think like one thing that I'm really excited about and see happening already slowly, but will be definitely the future going forward, is AI human hybrid companies. So we really have to prepare for a workforce in which we really collaborate with AI agents as if they are like our respected colleagues. I think it becomes very, very normal for us to see an AI in our workforce, work with them day to day, and just see them as a colleague. It also starts to feel like working with a colleague. So that's going to be normalized. I wouldn't say in 2025, but you will see the initial like companies, early adopters, adopting the AI human hybrid workforce, where AI agents are very much an integrated part of the workforce and seen as colleagues with their own job titles, job descriptions, their own skill sets, etc., own access to tooling and access to information. And going forward, this will become the norm for every single company out there. It will be hybrid humans and one part AIs.
Incredible. Yuma, this has been incredible. Omega AI, pushing the boundaries of, what is, possible. I can't wait to see, how your vision for kind of this autonomous enterprise unfolds. For those that, want to follow your journey, just tell me, where can they, find and learn more about, what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. You can go to o-mega.ai, see the website, sign up for a free trial for our platform, start automating with your agents. And you can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn, Yuma, and you should be the first one that you find. So very curious also to receive everyone's feedback about Omega, and we'll set this forward.
Very cool. Remember the dash in between O and Mega, very key when you're looking for his website stuff.
Otherwise, you'll get watches.
Yeah, exactly. That's happened to me a couple times. And then a good follow on social. So make sure you do that. Thanks again for joining us, and everyone listening, stay tuned for more conversations just like this on where the world is headed.